Hello, everyone, and welcome to Edge Talk Radio. My name is Angela Zabel. That's me. And today we are going to be talking with Linda Eastburn, and we're going to be doing intuitive encounters, your way to power to success. There's so much to come and work through today. Linda is an author, a filmmaker, so much more. I can't wait to get into it with Linda today. And so, who am I? My name is Angela Zabel. I have come connected to spirit, working with those in the non-physical my entire life, sharing messages from a multitude of realms. And I am a teacher, coach, medium, gallery reader, retreat host, a writer, and I also do so much more online. So you can do intuitive sessions, mediumship sessions, and I am excited to share those with you. Also, I also have classes and the Amplified Universe membership. So what is that? That is a connection to who are we? What are we doing here? What is our role in the world today? That is something we go in deep on the Amplified Universe monthly membership. And you can find out more about me at angelazabel.com. And I'm pretty much on all the social media aspects, so look for me out there. And today, I'm going to try to set this up in here. We are here with Edge Magazine. Edge Magazine is the leading events and media resource dedicated to all aspects of holistic living, health, wellness, and the mysteries beyond, sharing information, wisdom, and resources committed to promoting businesses, organizations, and individuals who support our collective journey to wholeness and balance. It's currently distributed in 30 states and Canada with over 17,000 magazines per printing, and they have a vibrant online magazine with over 42,000 people reached per month. Have the magazine shipped to your door. Stay up to date with the newsletter. Become a drop spot. If you are a business, become a drop spot. Sign up on their website. And also check out Kelly Wagner has another show called The Being Curious Show. And with that, go on their website, edgemagazine.net, to find out all the information you're looking for. And today we are here with Linda Eastburn. She is an author, filmmaker, intuitive, and she has her latest book, S.P.I, Your Way to Power and Success. Her other books include The Heart, Riding the Intuitive Wave, The Threshold to Encounters. She has taught intuitive arts for over 30 years, and today she hosts the Linda Eastburn YouTube channel focusing on creating a platform for others to tell their story. She was the host of a television and radio show, Anomalies, founded with the Midwest Research Society, where she took groups on research trips. She has spoken at conferences, universities, and medical institutions all over the U.S. Her films have played from art houses to movie theaters, and I can't wait for you to check out more about Linda. There is so much. Go to her website. It's lindaeastburn.com/Linda-Eastburn-S-P-I. And don't worry about remembering it. The link will be down below. It will make it so much easier for you. But there's classes, courses, workshops, intuitive training. There is so much available on her website. So definitely go and check that out, along with all of her books. And today I can't wait to get into talking to Linda about her new book and everything leading up to here. So, Linda, how did you get started in what you're doing now? And
Well,
thank you so much for being on here
well,
first.
thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's kind of last minute thing for both of us. So yeah, we're,
Yes.
we're very, very pleased to be here. That's a big question. I didn't start out doing this. Of course, most of us don't, but in my 20s, I was not doing anything even related to intuitive work. In my 30s, I began doing real estate investing, started a company with my ex-husband, and we were very progressive with that. And I started to notice that there was a lot of my intuition guiding a lot of the purchases we did, and just a lot of understanding of how things came about, and and also manifesting things. So there was some, and there's one story I like to tell you. This was before I ever started doing the intuitive work, but I was working for a company at that time, leasing a property management company with commercial properties, and they were developing three large housing developments. These were single family homes, and they were developing them so fast, and I was the manager of these three developments. So it was my responsibility to make sure all of these properties got leased out in due time because they were coming online really, really fast. These are brand new homes, so they weren't leasing cheap. So it was really hard to get them all leased out. But it was a lot of work. I was working, 7 days a week, sometimes 12-hour days. I mean, it was just, there was no stopping. It was just constant, constant, constant. But it was something that I did in the interim of some property management things that we were doing. So it was a good resource for income at that time. But I had kind of come to the end of my line with that and really wanted to exit that particular position. They were, however, providing me a home, a brand new home in one of the subdivisions in order for me to be closer on site to manage those subdivisions that were being developed. And at the time, I was like, okay, if we leave here, I wanted to buy a house. I'd left a house that we owned to move here, but we rented it out. And I had criteria. There's a certain area of town I wanted to live in. I wanted a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, ranch style. We were, however, going to be a little strapped financially if we bought a house. So we knew that it would be somewhat complicated because if I left this position, my husband was working on a software development program with absolutely no income from that, until you develop it and market it, there's no income from it. So here I was, wanting to leave this job, wanting to buy a house, having this very rigid criteria of a house that I wanted to purchase. And we only had, a couple $1,000s that we were willing to put as a down payment on the home. And we knew a bank would just laugh us out of the office if we went to a bank and said, "Oh yeah, neither one of us are working in it. We only have $2,000 to go down on this house." So we knew we couldn't do that. We knew enough about real estate to know that wasn't going to fly. So what we did was I just started, I just put it out there, just intuitively feeling our way through this. And one day, my husband recognized that I wanted to leave. He said, "Just go ahead and give your notice." It was a 2-week notice. So in 2 weeks, I was going to have to leave the house we were living in. So we had exactly 2 weeks to find a home, close the home, and move into the home in order for this to occur.
Small task,
So
small task.
so we're talking no jobs, no money, and very little time. So what are the odds? I mean, the odds are pretty limited in that scenario, right? Well, it was kind of early on in that 2-week process. I just given my notice. My husband finds a house for sale by owner. We realized that would be our best opportunity. I couldn't even get off work to go look at it. That's how busy I was. So he went to look at the house and he said, "I think this would work." It was in the area we wanted, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It did need some new carpeting, but he thought, that could be done. And the seller was willing to take just our 2,000 down. And he didn't even ask us about our jobs or our income or anything. I mean, that it was unreal. So I was like, okay, we're good to go. So we made an offer on the property, put it under contract, closed within a week, got the new carpet within a week, and we moved in within 2 weeks. It was exactly the part of town I wanted to live in. Everything worked beautifully. So I began to notice that a lot of things in life were that way, that, I had an intent or a desire. And if I just followed my intuition, just trusted that, it would lead us to the exact right place and time to be able to manifest things that we wanted in our life. But that one was a doozy. So it was within a few years after that I began to take some classes in meditation, some things I'm sure are similar to what you teach, some meditation, trying to figure out all of these things that were happening to me had to come from somewhere, right? And I wanted to understand that more, but also I wanted to be more connected to that inner voice that I was very attuned to, but I wanted to know more about that. I could not do that on command. It was like it would come in when I needed something. It was a good, stable resource for me, but I couldn't just ask a question, get an answer. So this group of people that I was studying with, they did sessions, and they did a health intuitive session for me. And the woman who did this session, she was very profound. She had a major impact upon me. She saw an issue in my body that I had had for a few years, several years actually, and no physician had ever been able to really resolve the issue. It was a small amount of pain that would happen occasionally, but no one knew what it was about. no one knew how to get to the bottom of actually what was occurring. And she nailed it immediately. Immediately, she saw it and she said, this will resolve it. But more than that, she saw the body-mind relationship. She saw the emotions that I would go into that caused this strain or stress or tension in my body that would then cause this valve in my system to tighten. And then that would cause a backup in my small intestines, thus causing the pain that would then occur. And after that session, I'm like, oh my goodness, the wisdom out of this woman's mouth. It was just profound. And I decided right then and there, I would love to be able to get to that information that she could see something that clearly and be able to help me. So I set out to take my class seriously and do all of the exercises and to develop some kind of a connection with that inner voice that was that I could do it on command. And that's where it all started anyway. That was when I was about 40.
Wow. That's really it's really interesting that you're bringing this up because a lot of people they look at their life and they're going, I do manifest different things in my life, but I don't know how I did it. And a lot of people they do it without even realizing it. But once you start kind of digging in a little deeper and going, okay, if I can do it when I need it, how can I do it when I want it? And to do it more on command. I mean, it doesn't mean it comes on command every single time, but you're more in charge. You're the one that's in the head of the boat, bringing it in instead of waiting to see where the boat lands.
That is so true. And that kind of it's been a long stretch. I'm 71 now. I was 40 when I started a lot of my journey here. Lots of has happened in between, and we can talk about all of that. But the book "S.P.I. Your Way to Power and Success" is and the S.P.I. stands for superpowered intuition.
I was just
So
gonna say,
that
what does that
yeah,
stand for?
superpowered intuition. But what brought that book about, and that's my latest book, but what brought that about was just observing my life. And like you said, we don't always know where that starts, but we do know life kind of begins on a quantum level. So I began to do some work with a physicist to try to see, okay, well, what is that process? What makes those things come about in our life? And so that's where the book came from.
I love that. And it's, to give someone a template to start with, a little bit of a roadmap to go down. And that's really what your book is about, is kind of a roadmap for people to help. How can I make it for myself? How can I create what I want in my life? And you have created a lot of different things in your life. I mean, you look at where you've been with real estate and film and working with a physicist and going into authoring books. And what was that? Was that kind of a natural progression for you? Or was it like, I want to do something different and starting to go down a different road? How did that work for you?
Well, each step of the way, of course, is a different story. But from real estate investing to the intuitive work was quite a leap. I mean, those are really two different worlds, let me tell you.
Yes.
However, I had been using my intuition during the real estate investing, but the real estate investing allowed me to have a financial platform that was very solid. So I was able to pursue a lot of other things in my life. The health intuitive work that I went on to do in the 90s, it was a kind of an interesting, spontaneous moment. Couple of different things that relate with intuition. One is how I came to have a small store in this little Victorian town. It was about a couple of hours away from my hometown in Springfield, Missouri. But one day I just kind of been thinking about it. I thought, here in Springfield, it was a little larger city, and I wore a hat of a real estate person, a businesswoman, business suit and everything. That was my work, my daily job, the work that I was doing. But I was very independent in that I could do other things too if I wanted to. So I decided, well, if I'm really going to change my identity, and sometimes you really do have to have something that pushes that a little bit. So I decided I wanted to open up just this little store that had, I wanted to have, books and antiques and do like little intuitive sessions, to be able to develop my skill more, but also to do it without the judgment of more of a business town and more of that business hat I was wearing in that town. So one day I woke up and I just felt this intuitive knowing to go to that town that day. And I really didn't think I'd find a store to rent. It was one of those back and forth things, you really don't think you'll find it. But I knew that day I needed to go look anyway. I had a real limited budget that I wanted to work on because I wasn't going to be there to make money from the store. I was going to be there just to develop my intuitive skills. So I was anticipating maybe a year having the store. So I had a very limited budget. But I was going to have to stay at the store part-time because remember, it was 2 hours away from my home. So I was going to stay there part-time. The store needed to have a kitchen facility and a bathroom for me and a little nook that I could put in maybe a day bed or something to be able to stay inside the store. So I that day I woke up knowing, sometimes our dreams really do tell us a lot. That way, that day I woke up knowing I was supposed to go to that town and look for a place. So I drove there 2 hours. Didn't even tell my husband I was going, which was unheard of. Usually we always knew where we were working. So I drove down, I made one loop around this little town and saw this building. It was an old storefront. It probably had been an old grocery store, a small little community grocery store. It had the two screen doors in front with the two other doors and big glass windows, for display. And I saw a for lease sign in the window and wrote down the number. This was before cell phones, before I even had a cell phone back in the 90s. So I made the loop, went back downtown, found a payphone, called. She could show it to me in an hour or so. So I had lunch, drove back, and she was there. She met me. She opened the door. I walked in, and it was just fabulous. It had, the old hardwood floors, all tall ceilings. It had the tin ceiling, on the ceiling. These big, huge fans. I mean, it was just picturesque as far as a type of store that I was looking for, and perfect for developing your intuitive abilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a counter. I walked behind the counter. There was a stove, a refrigerator, and a sink. Well, there was obstacle number one I overcome. Went back to this little nook in the back, and I thought that would be perfect for a little day bed back there, so I could stay if I needed to at my store. There was a door that I thought was probably a closet of some sort. I opened it up, and it's a full bath. Shower, sink, still everything. So I've already overcome the obstacles of everything that I thought would be a problem. And this is the only store I looked at as well. So I asked the price, and the price was the exact amount I had established that I could afford to pay. So that's where I literally birthed my intuitive interaction with people, my intuitive skills. I had the store open about 6 days a week, and I would do just small little intuitive sessions for people, charging like $5 for 5 minutes, because I didn't have a lot of confidence in my intuitive ability. But I'd been there maybe 6 months when a woman from the community whom I did not know set an appointment. I didn't have the store open on Sunday. But she wanted the appointment on Sunday. I thought, well, I could do that. I could open it up on Sunday afternoon. So I met with her, and I set the time to meet with her. I was at the store. I was going to be closed. So I was going to do the session up front at a table that I had in the front of the store, an antique table that was actually for sale. I didn't normally do sessions up there. But in the back beside my little day bed, I had some decorative things, and some little crystals were back there, and a little crystal ball in the stand, just for decoration only. But for some reason, when I passed by that before she got there, I thought, I'm going to move that little crystal ball up to the table up front. And I thought, what are you trying to be, a crystal ball reader? What are you doing? And it's like, I didn't know why. There again, it's just following that intuitive path. I set the crystal ball down the table. She arrived. She had a lot of questions about things that had nothing to do with her physical health whatsoever. And she looked, she was in her 40s. She looked healthy. She looked fine. I couldn't tell anything was a problem or wrong with her. But at the end of the session, and this completely changed the trajectory of my life. So this was a very important moment at the store. At the end of our session, she said, "Can you get in touch with my guardian angel?" And I thought, I don't know. And I said that out loud. I have no idea if I can get in touch with your guardian angel. I didn't do that before. I said, the only thing I can do is to just go back into that inner level intuitive state I've been in and see what comes through. And as I was intending to do that, I looked down, I saw that little crystal ball, and I knew to pick it up and put it between the palms of my hands. And the minute I did that, there was a sensation that ran up through my arms and into my heart. And my heart just absolutely opened. Now I know it was probably my heart chakra that opened. And
Yeah.
I felt the deepest sense of love and compassion I had ever felt in my life. And
Wow.
words just began to tumble out of my mouth, and they came so fast I couldn't stop them. They just were flowing, flowing, flowing. And it was all about her health. It was about, she had some chronic disorder. I didn't name that disorder because, as a health intuitive, I can't really prescribe, or I can't prescribe anything, but I also can't diagnose anything. But I did
Right.
see that there was a chronic disorder in her system, and that she wasn't taking care of herself well. She was not getting sleep. She wasn't eating right. She was going on long, nights out, drinking too much alcohol. I mean, there was just so many things, but it also went into the mind body relationship,
Mhm.
how, who she had been, how she'd been, things she'd been through, how they had brought her to this point. And she was only 40. She was not, a
Wow.
person that should have been having health issues at that time. So when I finished, and it was profound because it came so quick, I opened my eyes, and she was just like in awe, and I was in awe, and we're both like, well, where did that come from? Now I know. Now I've done enough research on brainwave activity to understand that when you go into a deep, deep concentrated state like that, you can flip into something called a gamma brainwave state, which
Wow.
is a really focused state, and that information can come through very quickly. The Tibetan monks go into that state at times. People who are in just deep, deep concentration, they get so focused that their mind just starts working on a different path. And I realized that's what had happened to me, but I certainly didn't know that for years. But that changed my life. The trajectory from that point was, okay, I had never intended to be a health intuitive because I thought, I don't know enough about the body. I don't know enough about disease or disorder or mind body relation. I just don't know enough to do that. And suddenly I realized that if I just depended on the voices that came through, the information that came through, and opened my heart, because it was that connection with her from that heart resource that enabled me to get that information. And so from that point forward, I started doing my intuitive work from a deep, compassionate state. And every time I would do a session, it was just as important to open up that compassion from my heart to connect as it was to open up my mind to connect with them. So that's how the health intuitive progressed and happened. Again, a story that's kind of lengthy, but it certainly changed my life.
But it's also really good for people to hear because a lot of people think, okay, if I'm doing something, I can't get from point A to point B. Like you made that leap from, doing the intuitive to going to that more health intuitive and trusting, using the crystal ball, using that, trusting yourself that there's something different, trusting your intuition on what's next. And that's something for people, I think is very important for people to hear that just because you're on one trajectory, it doesn't mean it can't change in an instant when you're opening yourself up. And to kind of be, my team is kind of coming in and saying, and for people to be open to the fact that their life can change in an instant. It doesn't have to take a long progression for people to understand things can change so quickly and are, especially now with this energy we are in is absolutely just warp speed. So be prepared for something that may happen without the fear in it. You trusted. Trust yourself.
You did. Yeah. And a lot of what I teach, and I'm sure you do too, just from what you said, is that, sometimes we have to take a little risk, and we have to move into something that's a little outside of our comfort zone to do that. And that's something that once we start trusting and taking small steps toward taking those risks, I encourage people to do something a little out of your comfort zone every day. And that will help you to begin to trust that you can live with the risk at hand. But the book is about getting the Aspire Your Way to Power and Success is really about getting the life you want. And it's power and success. People always think, oh, you're into, corporate, whatever, no, power is just trusting those inner levels, and success is creating the life you want. That's what I'm talking about.
And that's really key right now because there's a lot of people, there's so many shifts going on, and people are doing personal shifts in themselves and they're reevaluating their lives and asking themselves, what do I want? But then they look at what do I want, but how do I get there? And that a lot of times will cause depression in there because they're like, I feel I'm here. I want to get there. I don't know how to get there. And then they feel like they have no pathway to get there. That's why your book, I think, is something that really helps people to kind of bring it back into context. And so when you've done this book, you've been transforming your own life along the way, and you have transformed your life all the way through your life from
Yeah.
all different aspects. And how do you, when you were going through this, I just keep feeling like you were hearing or feeling that this was also going to make a big shift for other people as they were reading it. Were you also getting like kind of channel guidance or intuitive guidance as you were writing this book? And how did that work out for, how did that work for you? Were you like writing and then getting information, taking it from personal experience? How was that going?
Yeah, it was a daily activity of just going into that intuitive state and asking questions. And, I kind of back engineered my life.
Mm.
And as I was doing that, I was working with a physicist, but I was also this physicist that I know also trusts my skills because I've worked with him for a long time. But it was like I would have this inkling that this was I would ask the question, okay, I understand I'm in this state when I project an intention of something that I want to happen. Now, one of the things that has been really valuable to me is being able to see things in the future. So I knew that that was an important part of this. Like when I woke up and knew to go to that little town and look for the shop that day, that was already available for me. So a lot of what I teach people to do, and I know visualization is a real important skill that a lot of people use, but I add one more step to just visualization is like, let's visualize and see what's available for us. Because if that opportunity is sitting there, you can shorten the length of time it takes to manifest something immensely. So the house that we manifested was already there. That man already had that house available. And it was already known intuitively that that person would take our $2,000 and owner finance that to us. So if we can get in touch with what's available, rather than trying to create something, from a lot of, well, it's going to take a little while to put all that together. Yes,
Yeah.
it will happen. Yeah, yeah. I believe the power of visualization and the power of law of attraction, all of that will work, but we can make it work faster if we know what's available to us. So that's part of what the book is about. And so every day I would go in and say, okay, how was that done? What is the process behind that? How do I teach people? So the whole book basically was channeled, from
Love it.
from an inner intuitive place, that, yeah, I knew my own experiences. Those part weren't channeled. That was just memory of what's happened to me. But to understand the process all the way through of how that was happening. Now, I taught intuitive skills for years, because everything I know, I try to just give that back in classes and help other people to attain the same. The
Yeah.
manifestation portion, honestly, I had not taught that before. So that's something that's new for me. So I've just added one more step to that whole process.
I think that's really key because one of the things I've been hearing from my team and feeling and knowing is that the ability for humans to manifest what they want, the ability for humans to get into understanding who they are, why they're here, but we're here to create wonderful, magical, beautiful things. And for us to realize we can and we will be manifesting so much more going forward because of people like you who are helping people find ways to do it, find ways to manifest what they want because we're here to create great lives, not mediocre lives, great lives. And how do we do that? And that's so important. And as you've been doing this book, you started off with so many different, I mean, you've been all over, and we talked earlier before we were on air, and we talked about how you went into the paranormal aspect and understanding more about that. And when we were saying how really all of this does go together, because I know a lot of people who you're waking up your intuition and then you check in, you kind of delve into the paranormal and then you understand more there and then you bring it out another direction with manifesting and and understanding who you are. And as you were doing that, they're just saying they want you to kind of explain a little bit more about going back into when you went from your intuitive, where you were doing the readings, different things there. When did you start going into the paranormal aspect? And then did you see a correlation between the paranormal and what you're doing now?
Absolutely. There was a lot of life that happened between 40 and today. So I'll go back to um it was in 2013, my mother had a stroke. And at that time, I was in kind of the heyday or the top of my field in the intuitive work. I was traveling all over the country. I built a nationwide clientele, speaking at a lot of the university's medical centers, women's retreats, unity churches, wherever, metaphysical centers all over. And my mother had a stroke, and she didn't handle that particularly well. She
Mm.
was incapable of walking from that point forward or using her left hand. She could still talk. Her right hand was good, but she needed care, and I was there for her. So I just stopped, and I was fortunate to have still my real estate investments to support me, so I could do that. So I stopped doing the traveling, and a lot of the intuitive sessions began to fade away. I didn't have time to do a lot of those. So at that
Right.
point, I took 5 years of my life, and my intuition was there all the way through all of that, enabling us to help my mother and my father to stay home on their farm during the rest of the duration of their life for about 5 years. So that being said, I kind of left that intuitive work for quite a while. Once they passed in 2015 and 2017, I realized that I was a little older at that point. I was about 65 at that point. So I was like, I had some things on my bucket list. I had always wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. It's just something that had been in the back of my mind for a long time. And also because I had just lost both of my parents, and I was so intricately involved in their care, that was a tremendous loss. There was a lot of grieving that happened. But after about 4 months, I decided, you can't just sit here. You have to do
Yeah.
something. And so I thought, well, what is it that I really truly want to do? And it's like, well, I would like to learn how to make documentary films. So I got, as with most things in my world, rather than to go the educational route, I just jump in with both feet. So I had the financial capacity to buy all the equipment and hired an editor to help me because I knew nothing about this. So we
Right.
made some just kind of fun films at first, just to get the knack of doing some of the work. And then I made some films, some documentary films that I felt really proud of, and they did play, at theaters and art houses, and even I made one on about a veteran, and that played at history departments at universities, and so I felt really, really proud about that. But it was
Very good.
during that period of time I started making this little thing that I didn't know anything about YouTube at that time.
Oh, yes.
I'd never watched a YouTube show in my life, but my editor had. He was much younger, he was in a whole different generation than me. So he kept saying, well, why don't we do something that we can just put out on YouTube? It would be easier than trying to market it to movie houses. So I
True.
thought, well, okay. So I started doing this little show called Intuitive Journeys, and it was fun. I had a lot of people volunteer to come in and work with that. And we were just learning some intuitive skills of remote viewing and going to places and seeing if we were correct or not. And we put 10 shows out on this YouTube channel, which is now the Linda Eastburn YouTube channel.
I like it.
One day there was a woman in that class who we would often exchange intuitive impressions for one another, just as a simple change. And she was making a change in her life. She had an opportunity to move, and she was considering moving. So she asked if I would take a look at that and see, how I saw that turning out for her. And so after that, I said, well, what do you see in my world? And she thought, well, I think you're going to be making some changes as well. And she saw some changes with my real estate, and then she saw some other things that would come about. And at the end of that, she just said, oh, and by the way, this is brought to you by Bigfoot. And I'm going, Bigfoot? Talk about something I've never had an interest in is,
Yeah.
you know. So, but I have done this long enough, and I'm sure you have as well, to know that when something like that comes across your radar and it's so outlandishly different than anything you would ever thought of on your own, you just pay a little bit of attention to that, right?
A
So
little bit, yeah. It gets your attention when they say
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's like, okay, Bigfoot. So I had the intent, if I had this YouTube channel, I wanted it to be at least successful, right? And it
Right,
wasn't going anywhere. It was going to be a long day before that was going to have any kind of monetary return, or we were going to have enough subscribers, mostly
right,
friends and family of the people in the show watching it. That was just the way it
right.
was. So after she told me that, within that week, I saw on Facebook, came across my radar that there was a Bigfoot conference in town. It was the first one ever in my area. I didn't even
Oh,
know they had Bigfoot conferences. So I'm looking over the 5 guest speakers that were there, and there was one that was a linguist. And I thought, well, that might be an interesting person to interview and maybe bring into the intuitive journey show somehow. I didn't know for sure how I would incorporate that, but I'm kind of creative and doing that. So I thought, well, I'll just get in touch with him and see if while he's in town, I can get an interview. I could not find him anywhere online. He had absolutely no internet footprint whatsoever. I could not
mhm.
find this man. I could see where once upon a time he had worked teaching at some university, but that email was obviously dead and gone. So I went to the conference. I got his email from his son because he was just swamped after his talk.
Mhm.
So I didn't talk to him directly. I got his email. So I sent him a message and asked if he was willing to give me an interview. He just lived 3 hours away from me. And he
Oh,
was.
wow.
He was very willing to give me an interview. So I took 3 cameras, a couple of people, rented an Airbnb, and we did 6 hours of filming
Wow.
of Scott Nelson. I came back, edited that with my editor, and frankly, because my YouTube channel just wasn't doing much, and it was costing quite a bit to edit these shows and put them up, I thought, yeah, I don't know that I want to continue with this YouTube channel thing.
Right.
Because it really wasn't accomplishing what I wanted. But sometime before that, I had told my sister, I said, you know what I really want? I want to be able to make film, do shows, and have an international audience. That's my goal. And I didn't see YouTube really doing that for me at that time. So I put up this. Scott Nelson had a different take. He was a linguist for the Navy, and he had come across these Sierra sounds, which is some recordings from the 70s of what they think could possibly have been a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. And
Right.
he had analyzed those and really, really very intellectually put together a lot of material that showed that there was possibly a language there. There was, and you'd have to watch the show to get all that detail. It really doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about now. But I put that up on a Wednesday. On Friday, I was with my sister that day, and kind of 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I checked in, and it's like, oh, that's up to 800 views, about twice as many as my intuitive journey were. And by 5 o'clock, I was going out to dinner, and I checked it was up to 2,500 views, and it just kept going up. And now it's up to 265,000 views. It monetized my channel.
Wow.
And it just took me into the Bigfoot world. And since then, I've interviewed so many people that have had very interesting paranormal experiences, cryptid experiences, UFO experiences, a lot of just unusual phenomena. And I'm thinking, well, this isn't so far from a lot of the experiences that you and I have, that
Yes.
when you go into that world that's at a quantum level or something that's just beyond what the 5 senses can understand, you have different experiences sometimes. So that's what took me into the paranormal world. And even though it's a little off track from what I'm doing now, this is not so far from it, but it's still what I want to get back to is teaching people how to manifest. But I still think that one came to me. It was like an opportunity here. And what it really gave me was an understanding of the value of that international audience, because that's what I gained from that. I kind of needed to get a lot of this Zoom meetings and, the podcast world and all of that under my belt before I launched something as more significant as what I'm doing now. Bigfoot's still significant to all those people that have those experiences, though. And so are the entities and the beings that people often encounter.
Absolutely. And I've actually spoken and I've been a gallery reader at different Bigfoot conventions. And once you open yourself up, all the realms are available. And there is so much information coming from the other realms if you're open and intuitively tapping into that, there is so much to be gained too. So, intuition, that's why all this really does go together. Once you're learning how to manifest the connections with those on the other side in all different realms, you're also connecting to yourself, your guides, all those that are there helping you to bring those manifestations into play. And that's why all these worlds really do collide. They all come together and they all create this amazing space of going, okay, if I can connect to Bigfoot or there's connections to Bigfoot and other entities and other universes, I call them the star nations. Once you realize that everything's possible and you start letting go of some of those doubts and fears about yourself, and then you go into, okay, if that's possible, what can I do for me? And that's where you're coming in now, is bringing what can I do for me and taking myself to the next level of who I am. And as you've been doing the learning the manifesting, and you went, I love the fact that you're like, okay, kind of bringing it to that scientific approach and going, okay, I want to work with a physicist. I want to talk about the quantum field and working in that quantum physics and bringing all of these fields together. How was that for you, seeing, kind of putting what you've been experiencing throughout your life and then seeing that energy, the quantum energy in those quantum fields and having a physicist say, yeah, you're onto something. How was that for you?
Well, this person and I have worked together for a very, very long time. So it ended up being something that was very simple and easy for us because I can intuitively see things and he can explain some of the energies that he thinks working there. Now he does research in his own right, but so much of his material was utilized in understanding this process that I'm going through. What it all kind of boiled down to is, we're all creating all the time, just that most of us really do create kind of a rote sort of thing. So every day is basically like the day before. So,
Yep.
if you want to move out of that, you really have to start understanding how you're managing your energy field at this time. And
Yes.
managing energy fields at that quantum level is something that we can't see that. It's not something
Right.
that we visually have. Most of us don't have sophisticated enough instruments to measure that world. So we have to feel our way through that world. And learning how to be more intuitive, learning how to get in touch with that level, we begin to have a deeper understanding of how we're creating from that quantum place. Another thing that the book talks about is being able to see past, present, and future, because there's an energy field called torsion energy that it's actually something that comes from the sun, but it also comes from human beings as well. And we have light, we have biophotons within our body, and those create also that torsion energy. So I think part of, there again, back engineering my experience is part of what I learned to do, perhaps came into this life knowing how to do, or just became acquainted with how to do it, was to be able to see how that flow from past, present, and future occurs. And if you can get in the flow of that energy at a quantum level, you just kind of know the next stage, the next step, the next outlet for you. And early on, I used to call them the silver platter of opportunity. It seemed like I would think something and there would be the opportunity in front of me. Of course, you have to be willing to take that opportunity when it arises. But I think
Yes.
it's because I could sense that flow, between the past, present, future. And that energy, that torsion energy, is how we do that. So that's part of the book. It's part of the training to be able to create more light within your system, to be able to create more of those concentrated states. Like I said, I went into whenever I did the spontaneous health intuitive session. And then to be able to go in and monitor that, how you see it on a timeline coming about in your life, so that you can get in sync with the flow of timing with things. And all of that kind of comes together, and that's the physics portion of it. But the course that I teach, which is also called S.P.I, S period P period I period, it
No.
has a process that you go through and being able to learn that at depth. And we start all the way from the beginning point of self-awareness, understanding how you're creating today, all the way to being able to create things that you want on command.
And that's something it's so important, especially now for people just to understand how to do it. And I just keep hearing from my team. They keep saying it's people who are putting together the scientific aspect along with that non-seen, unseen aspect and bringing those intuitive aspects together, that is what's going to be so groundbreaking going forward. So groundbreaking in the fact that people have something you can sink their teeth into and there's a lot of people. I mean, and honestly, like you said, a lot of the world you and I deal with is unseen. It's trusting, it's feeling. But how do you take people who are like, show me the facts. I want to see what it is. I want to see how this works. Give me a roadmap to go. You're creating that, and that is so important going forward. And as you started, I love they're just saying you've always been a person who even though something's happening, then you go back and go, how did it happen? It's always the why behind it. How did that happen? How did I create that? How did I bring that in? And and I just keep hearing that they're also saying that when you did that, it wasn't like, oh, what did I do? It was also a fun, like exploring, how can I figure this out? And then to help others find a way to. And that's key going forward. And you've been doing the intuitive teaching, over 30 years now. You've been doing this, but it's changed and shifted over the last few years as to being more. I I'm just what I'm feeling is it's gotten more focused on helping people on specific areas. Before it was more general, and now it's a lot more focused. And as that's come in, has it also made your life more focused too?
Absolutely. It's like everything became just like really centered around this. And it has been a little fast speed, I can say, because things happen very quickly for me sometimes. It's been a little fast speed, but I'm keeping up. It's like I'm getting more organized and scheduled, doing all the podcasts I'm doing, starting a new podcast, being on other people's podcasts. I mean, all of this it's just taking off. But it's what I said. I'm here. Use me. Let me teach. Let me help. Let me help others. My number one thing is that I feel for people who are feeling as if their life is somehow less than perfect. And
Yes.
none of our lives are perfect, but I think that we can all step up and create so much more. And we have so much more power than we've been shown or taught. And the book goes into that a lot as well. We've been kind of institutionalized to believe that I'm programmed to believe that we are not as powerful as we are. And I have a life that shows it to be very different than that. I think that when we get in touch with that inner self, it can be very, very powerful.
And I think that's important too for people to look at. We're human. We're not perfect. We have struggles. We have things we're working through. But throughout it all, if you can find a way to tap into who you are, to know there is a better way. There is a way to get through those troubles. And like you had said, or those challenges when you had said you do the remote viewing and the tapping into the past, present, and future, that's something to know that no matter where you're at in this moment, if it's the most challenging day ever, to know there's a version of you, a future version of you that has gotten through it already, and how to find that path that's the easiest path through sometimes the biggest. They're just showing just a big mud pile of mud in front of me and how people can get through that easier and find a way to get above it and navigate what they need to in life. And I'm just hearing from them, and there's something we had said earlier, about people get frustrated with their life, feeling it's maybe mediocre and wanting more, but saying, I don't know if I can get there. There's no life that's really mediocre. And it's realizing every day you're doing something, you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining input, you're gaining intuition. Even when it feels like you're stuck, you're always moving forward. But knowing you can have something different in your life. And a lot of people have kind of given up on that and feeling like I can't do it. There's no way possible. And that's why seeing what you've done, saying, okay, if you were able to do this and change course completely, so can they. it gives them hope. I guess I'm hearing it. It gives people hope, and you are helping to give people hope that there is a way to move forward. There is a way to tap into it. And you've done the, they want me to go back into the past, present, and future and the remote viewing. Is that something that you started learning through your intuitive when you were learning all your intuition aspects that start coming out online then? And what brought you into like the remote viewing and knowing there is a future self?
Yeah, the future had always made itself pretty clear to me, whether it be in dreams, that started kind of early on in my life, whether it be in dreams or whether it be just a download of knowing something. That was something that was just kind of a natural state of mine. But to do the remote viewing, to be able to see the future in remote viewing, that was a skill that I developed and taught other people. And that was something I learned from others. But I think that, in the process of seeing future events, I think we have to think very broadly about our perceptions. Our future events are already, manifesting. They're already beginning in some form of manifestation. But we all know that, future has many options. There are many random things that can happen in our future. So what my SPI technique teaches people how to influence those random events so that the events that do happen become the ones that you want to happen rather
Mm.
than the ones that you do not want to happen. Because, and as we learn to utilize seeing them, once you see them, and there's something that happened early on in the 90s in my intuitive development. I was learning, to be the creatorship of existence. You learn to be your own creator of life, and
Right.
learning to be intuitive. And I was on a little journey about 5 hours from my home with my husband. And it was evening. We just stopped for dinner. We were on our way, and it was starting to rain and it was cold. And
Mm.
I was really nervous about these next 2 hours driving with ice forming on the windshield, and the roads maybe getting a little slick. And
Yeah.
this was not a road. This was a hilly, curvy road we did not want to be on if it was real icy. So I was a
Yes.
little concerned about that. So I intuitively asked, how the road conditions were going to be down the line.
Mm.
And I heard in 2 hours that this one specific town, the roads would be completely dry and we would be completely safe from that point forward. That's the
Wow.
download and because by that time I'd learned how to ask a question, get an answer intuitively that clear.
Yeah.
So at that point, when we reached that little town, skies stopped raining and roads were completely dry. We drove completely safe on through our journey. So at that point, and of course, like you said, I always ask more questions. It's like, okay, did I create those dry streets or did I just intuitively know them? And what came back was both. And it's like, okay, that was a journey of trying to figure out what do you mean both, But the thing is, when you intuitively look at things, you always want to see the highest best, because as we see the highest best, we've shined light on it, literally. That torsion energy has gone into the future. We have looked at it, we've seen it. It is at that point becoming more dense. It hasn't
Yeah.
fully manifested in our life. It's kind of like on a holographic form, but we have just separated that event from all the other random events that can happen in our future. So as we look at things, it's very important, I think, for us to see the highest, best, and the most good. And that comes from a deep state of self-love, self-worth, self-importance.
Mhm.
And so as I do this work, like I said, that compassion in my heart opened up, and that's where I knew I had to be whenever I did sessions for other people. And so from
Yeah.
that place, we're always seeing the highest and best. That's where we are adding light to that to make sure that that is what we want to bring into our life and manifest for ourselves. That's something that creates, a lot of positive thinking and a lot of optimism and hope for people, that they do have influence over those random events that would normally just happen to us.
And that's something really important to know that you do have influence over it. Sometimes people say, well, everything's set in stone, but it's not everything set in stone. You have the option to move and move everything you're doing going forward. Are there options there? Just like you said, you can look at the future with, and my team is just saying, sometimes people with the rose-colored glasses, some people put on the glasses of everything's bad going forward. What you're what your fears are projecting, you can either draw it to you or you can change that and start drawing in something with more light, a better outcome than you ever expected. And that's something with you and your book and what you've been doing is so helpful. And as your book, as you've kind of talked a little bit how it goes through different parts telling the stories, but also it's also going in and showing people how to do it. And that's something that's important. Is there almost like a workbook? Is it more of stories telling you how to do it? Is it kind of like a course in writing? What would you describe your book as?
My book describes the process, and it gives some elementary exercises that you can do to start to begin that
Got it.
process. The book also talks about so many people that have worked with me, that I worked with them. It's my life experiences, it's their life experiences. And I'll give you an example of one of those. There was a woman who was 40 and she was a teacher and she had never been married, but she wanted to have a relationship. She decided she really wanted a relationship. So, at that point in time in her life, she was realistic, about what was available to her. So
Yeah.
anyway, she just asked in a session. So as I looked there again, I'm holding the highest best for her and I'm looking at her future because that person is not in her life at that particular time. So we're doing the same thing that the book talks about and looking at the future. And I saw this individual and the words came in, that he was often close by her, but they had never met. Okay, so we
Oh,
knew that about him. We also got his physique, exactly what he looked like. We saw his profession. I saw where he lived was exactly due south 10 miles from her home. And she lived in a desert area. There were no trees in that area, not many. But where he lived, I saw a grove of trees surrounding his little subdivision and throughout the subdivision. There were an unusual amount of trees that were present. And so that's what I saw. I think I got initials of his name, but not his name.
right.
And shortly thereafter, she joined a dance class. And while she was, they had to have partners. And so all of the males and females kind of got together and she was dancing, had a dance partner, and they were talking. And he did fit the physique that I'd said, but she knew nothing else about him. And many people could have fit that look.
Right.
But she finally found out that, they started talking. And he found out where she worked. And he said, "Oh, my sister lives right across from that school. And once a week I go have dinner with them." So they were in close proximity to one another often, but had never met. Then
Right.
finally, she found out what he did for a living. Yeah, it was in the computer field. She found out his initials, of course, and yes, that fit. When she went to his house for the first time, it was exactly 10 miles due south of her home in that grove of trees, which was highly unusual. They got married and are happily married today. So you can see how just the visualization, she saw it, I saw it. It was a person that was potentially in her future, but by seeing it, we made that more concrete. Did that help them to maybe come in contact with each other? I believe it has influence. I believe it helped them come together and find one another just by looking at it into the future.
And that's so key is things can happen and are out there, but it's tapping in. And I really feel, and my team is saying too, when people know there's a possibility out there, they're opening up their heart to the possibility versus going, well, I'm just going to do a dance class and who I meet is who I meet. And they're not opening their heart to that possibility. So you're helped that person open their heart to the possibility to be there and to be ready for it and to go be willing to step into it. I think that's the biggest thing is to be willing to step into some of those future possibilities and not be fearful of it.
That's
But
true. Yeah. Yeah. And we do have influence, I think, over the things that happen to us. That's by maintaining that self-love. The things that we want in life are always available to us if we can just get into the flow with it and just, take some responsibility and being able to look at it, to see it, and then to manifest it.
Absolutely. And that's it. We do have the influence. We are the ones able to do that. And then, you talked about intuition and being in the flow. How do you think intuition is, and I know you've used it a lot, even in your business before businesses, before you even really knew what intuition was, you knew what you were using something and you were paying attention to yourself. But in business and in daily life, how important and spiritual growth, how important do you think it is for people to develop their intuition?
I think it's often the difference between success and failure. I
Mm.
think so many people like myself use it, but don't realize what they're using.
Yes.
I think the other part of intuition and the other part of manifesting in life is also to take some ethical responsibility with it. Because
Mm.
as we create, we have to also be really aware of how that's impacting other people. So I think that that's the spiritual growth with intuition, is just becoming very aware that we move forward as a unit of humans and nature and life, and to always be responsible toward others as well as ourselves. It isn't just a matter of, I want this, so therefore I'm going to go out and get this. It's like, well, I want this, but how is that also going to benefit others? And seeing that as well, because sometimes our intuition tells us not to do something or to do something, and it's that timing or flow that works well. It's a very interesting thing whenever I backed away from doing my intuitive work after my mom had her stroke and took care of my parents, who lived to be 90 and 94, so they had
Wow.
good long lives. It
Yes.
was such a grand opportunity, but I knew at that time that that was the place that I needed to be. And it was such a rich period of time in their life that I could share with them. And we would just do so many simple things. And it just brought me back to a place that understood the value that we have in life with people and with family and friends. And it's not all just about work, 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 even though I've used my intuition immensely in the workplace. But it's also using it in a personal level to understand and comprehend so much. So there's spiritual growth in everything.
And that's good. I love that because it is for people are going, well, I don't have time to, really dive in as much as I want to, and they're feeling bad about doing that. But realizing every relationship you have, every time you're interacting with people, and we're here on this earth to interact with people. We're here to make connections. We're here to open our hearts for that. And knowing that is spiritual growth, that you're growing in every moment. And sometimes the most profound growth can be happening when you're just working one-on-one with people or just a friend, a family member, a coworker that you just have really stimulating conversations with. And sometimes it's just being human, enjoying the beauty that's around you, enjoying the people that are there. There's so much growth in that. And they're saying, especially the heart chakra, especially the heart. There is so much growth in that. So don't come down on yourself if you don't have time to do or there's life is going on like you said you took time and you took care of your parents and there's so many people out there where they're taking care of parents or taking care of children. There's so much growth if you open yourself up to know when you're working with children how much they're expanding and to watch that expansion and have those connections with them is so key going forward. And that's something you're helping so many people with. And then so what do you have coming up? Any upcoming projects? Anything new you've got going on?
I am just starting a new podcast. And I hope to have you on this podcast, Angela.
Absolutely.
It's called Intuitive Briefcase, because the briefcase is all the business ways that you can use your intuition, and the intuitive part is the spiritual part. So I'm hoping to have a lot of people on that have intuitive success stories, what their experiences have been, spiritual stories, as well as business success stories. So I'm really looking forward to starting that podcast, and I will continue my YouTube channel, Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, with all of the unusual phenomena as well.
I I love that. And I know there's so much there. And it's really that intuitiveness. And yes, I absolutely would love to be on. And it's the intuitive business because there are a lot of people that have businesses and even just working in your business day to day, even if you're a worker, if you don't own the business but you work there, using your intuition all throughout the day to help your day go smoother, to help you move through things smoother. And I'm going to do a little segue here where when I was doing regular, not this work, but other work in the other world, I would use my intuition every day and say, help me. If I make a mistake, please let me know, or let me know where I need to do next, and to make it easier. And using that all throughout the day, it makes your day easier. So why not use it? And it's something, intuition is there for everyone to use every day, and it should be used every day. And you're teaching people how to take that superpower and bring it in and create a better life, an easier life, a life that flows easier. We're not meant to be such a difficult, challenging life, but finding ways when you do have challenges to flow easier, to move through it quicker, to have a better outcome, and visualizing a better outcome, putting that light on it, so important. And I can't say enough about what you're helping people with your new book, and you have other books out there, uh, and much more to be seen. There's your other books is I'm trying to see. I had it wrote down here and I can't find it all of a sudden. So you have, the heart writing the intuitive way and the threshold to encounters. There's so much more there. So definitely check those out. And I am encouraging people to go to your website, Linda Eastburn / Linda Eastburn S-P-I. And of course, that's all going to be down below. And then going on your YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, check out all of the other areas that Linda's on, because it is so important. This is something important as we all move forward. We all we can expect more for ourselves and have the hope that we can create what we want. And that's what you're helping people bring the hope back in, to go, I can do it. I can do it. Well, I thank you so much, Linda. Is there something you'd like to say before we close for today?
The only thing that's coming to mind is just one little exercise that people can do when you do get frustrated or you feel like things aren't going right, is to just step back a minute and just ask yourself the question, or just put into the ethers this question. Is like, show me a way. Because if you can just ask and then just wait for an answer, or it may come in the form of just something very physical, even that pops up. But there's always help. There's always help from those inner levels. That intuitive state is always trying to communicate with you. So show me a way and just wait for an answer.
I love that. I love that. That is so important, because a lot of times we get into situations we don't know which way to go. And to have that is so important. So thank you. Thank you so much for that, for helping the people and for people to understand there is so much more out there. Just open yourself up. Allow yourself to expand and take it in. And I just want to thank you again, Linda. This has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate it so much. And so much you have to offer. And again, I encourage people, go check out her website. You have the S.P.I training program. There's so much out there, along with intuitive training, remote. I don't know if you offer all these yet, the remote access training, quantum regression training, and then your books, S.P.I, A Way to Power and Success, and your other books with Heart Riding the Intuitive Wave and the Threshold to Encounters. So definitely go check out her website. I encourage you all. Linda, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, sharing your time, and sharing your heart. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much, Angela.
Oh, you're so welcome. And for all those out there, I want to make sure to watch the next episodes of Edge Talk Radio. They are on the first and third Wednesdays of the month at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And if you've missed any past episodes, no worries. They're all available on either Edge Talk Radio's YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel, and on pretty much every downloadable podcast there is. Go ahead and look for them and you will find them, or go to my website or Edge Magazine's website for links to all of the past episodes. And again, I want to thank all of you for listening, expanding, and amplifying our universe together. I wish and thank all of you for listening and wish you an absolutely amazing day. Thank you.